Welcome to Applied Intelligence, a conversation at the intersection of people, technology, and getting stuff done. And now, here's your host, Imteaz Ahamed.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Applied Intelligence podcast. I'm in Bangalore today, and I have the pleasure of being in the Sigmoid office where I'm going to be interviewing Tanika today. Welcome to the show, Tanika. How are you?
Thank you, Imteaz. Thank you for having me, and I'm very good. Thank you.
Super cool. So the first thing that I do on my podcast is I love to ask this question, which is, if you had an autobiography of yourself, and there were 5 chapters in that autobiography, what would the chapter titles of each chapter title be?
A very interesting question. So if I have to think about, of course, I've just spent around some years of my life, not going into my age. So I started, the first chapter would be the cocoon of curiosity. So I'm a single child. I was born in Bathinda, which is in Punjab, and raised in Faridabad. So being a single child, I was, brought up in a very protective environment. And I was very, very focused on studies. And actually, my parents used to tell me that you please go and play because I was so studious. So this whole journey, it was more focused, which actually kind of laid the foundation from where I am today, was more focused on understanding, the curiosity on learning things, discipline. So that was the first, the years of my life on the studies were more focused on building that foundation. So that would be the first chapter of, if I have to describe. Post that, what happened is, like when I did my 11th and 12th, the second chapter was more focused, would be about the uncertainty period, so which came into the picture. So I was, again, like being a teenager, when you're in 11th standard and 12th standard, you're not sure what you want to do with your career. And which generally happens, right? A lot of us are just either going into the medical stream or your engineering stream. Because I loved maths, I went into the engineering stream by default.
I'm giggling because my parents did the same thing.
Yeah, so that is in general what happened, right? Okay, you don't like bio, you like maths, go for engineering. But eventually, like when I started studying, and I was not sure, right? I was looking around, I was not sure whether this is the right path for my career, thinking about, maybe I can become an IAS officer. Right? So I should have taken biology. Actually, that phase of my life was very confusing for me, but eventually I went for engineering. But I did not probably, I did spend a lot of time thinking about it and did not study a lot. So that was the second phase. Post that, I did my MBA, and the third phase, which basically is about serendipity meeting opportunity. And after my MBA introduced me to data science and AI. So I joined the fraud modeling team where I was working, and I was lucky enough to join a team where they were focused on the prepaid model. So we had these prepaid cards, which are the Bluebird and Serve. In US, what happens is that there is a lot of underbanked and unbanked population, and it's very difficult for them to get cards. So this particular card was launched for them, which don't have a good credit history or any credit history, right? So you can have those cards. Now, we thought that since it's a prepaid card, we won't have a lot of fraud, right? You generally have frauds on a normal credit card. But we were very surprised to see that the fraudsters are very smart enough, and we saw a lot of frauds, and we eventually started looking at those cases, build those rules, and then eventually that model. And that's how my data science journey started. Again, a very good experience on how, because this was back in 2013. And then it scaled up. I went to MasterCard, JP Morgan Chase, again, more focused on fraud modeling. And in MasterCard, I worked on a lot of other areas as well in data science. But then that momentum grew, right? The fourth chapter being the momentum. And right now, I think the final chapter, again, that is in progress, and hopefully would be that I'm very passionate about generative AI, the new field which has come up. I'm working on a lot of use cases and building solutions for clients. And I do see, I'm very, very excited about how is it going to change the whole industry. I'm looking forward because the kind of innovation and which is happening every day, it's very difficult to catch up. Right. Every day there's something new happening. So I'm looking forward to those next years. That is from the professional side or the learning side, I can say. On the personal side, again, I'm a long distance runner. I have completed 10 half marathons. And so that is, again, one area of interest. I do love running, and that gives me it's something which actually helps me, you can say, meditate or release stress. So that is, on a personal front, that is something which I do enjoy a lot. Apart from reading motivational books, again, that is something which I really like. And I love coffee. So I always tell anyone that it's very easy to make me happy. Just get me a good cappuccino and you can, make me happy. So it's, that's all. Yeah, maybe, that is something more about how my autobiography will look like.
Very
and
cool.
it's evolving.
I love how you intersected serendipity into specifically moving from your MBA into AmEx and then falling in love with data science. Mainly because I also fell into data science and looking at all of these technological things because I come from a sales background. I don't come from a pure data science background, but data connects all of this stuff. And then this new field that's coming out, which is generative AI, I think the most value gets unlocked when you connect the dots between various experiences, various fields to create that value. We're going to dive much deeper into that. But the first question I had for you is, can you share a moment in your career when a data science solution you developed led to transformational change?
Yeah. So I think there are many. So luckily I've been able to work on a lot of different solutions which have created an impact. But the one I spoke about, the one which I started, because when we started, the fraud rate was really very high. And to work on that solution, the one we built for the prepaid cards, that actually led to savings of millions of dollars. That was one of the most transformational data science solutions which I would have built. So the one on the prepaid cards.
Sure. What was the insight in terms of, yes, fraud was happening, but how did you kind of identify, or what were the signals that were being processed to find these people out?
Yeah. So there are some very interesting things we observed, right? So, and which you would feel that are very obvious, right? When you are looking at, so one example I'll give you. So in one scenario, like we were looking at a use case and we saw that there's an ATM card, right? I mean, you could withdraw money using ATM, using that card. And we saw that when we started analyzing one case of a fraud, that a customer reported a fraud, right? They said that they lost their card and then someone withdrew the money from the ATM. And then we said that how did they get the ATM pin? So they said that we wrote it at the back of our card, right? So, and then again, that same thing happened with that customer, right? So it's very obvious, like you're still allowing that thing to happen. So there were two scenarios where the same thing happened. So this was one case. So then we kind of flagged it out. But another interesting case which happened was that what used to happen as a process, that the fraudster used to get access to the card, and then they used to actually, as a process, right, what we used to do is that we used to send back that the new details or the address details. So basically, if you are rechanging your PIN to the new phone number, not to the original one. So basically, the fraudster used to get access to the card. Right. And so basically, I'm a fraudster. I'll say that, I lost my card, or I get access to your card. Then I'll call back, then basically say that I want to change my PIN. Now the PIN, instead of being sent to the original phone number, they used to update that and send it to the new phone number. And so this was a process gap, right? So basically then it's very easy for the fraudsters they figured it out, got access to the card, and they were updating it and then got hold. So one thing I realized, right, a lot of solutions which get solved are solved when you go deep into the data. You'll start looking at those cases and details as compared to, right, just building models. So a lot of times I tell my team and a lot of peers as well, just don't take up data and think about, a lot of focus is on different kind of modeling methodologies as compared to looking at data and understanding those trends. So we just take up data and, fit it into those fancy models, either generative AI or LSTM, right? Deep learning. We want to use deep learning. But looking at those trends or, looking deep into the data is actually which brings value in solving problems. Even today, we have done a lot of advancement in technology, but that is what actually brings value. So
what I'm hearing is human behavior and analyzing the human behavior, and then using the machine learning and using technology to expose all of those cases where that similar pattern of behavior has happened.
Yes.
Is a very efficient way. But right now, it still feels like humans are needed to kind of find these cases.
Yes. I do believe, right? So specifically, we do need some analysis. Those are useful. We do have models which help us bring out, help us ease the process. They have generative AI probably could help you, but it's mostly on text data, but still it has helped you automate a certain process, but human intervention is required to bring out that value, and specifically in those complex scenarios.
So in order to come to these outcomes, you need collaboration. So how has the collaboration between data scientists and business leaders come together to solve problems like this? So how do you kind of bridge the gap between the technical knowledge that you need and the commercial outcomes that you're trying to drive?
I think one of the major thing, right, to understand, since now I work with more closely in Sigmoid, I work more closely with business leaders than in my previous roles. One of the things I've learned is that there has to be an empathy, right? You have to understand their pain point. So whenever you are solving, I used to, and that has been a learning for me as well. My focus previously used to be just on, making sure that KPI, the performance metric, right? Either the accuracy, those are met. But now working with business leaders, right? You realize that you have to understand what exactly is the business value they're trying to drive, right? You have those discussions. We are solving a problem, but what is the major benefit or, the major value you are going to get out of that? And you design your solution in a way that you are able to achieve that. So just not focusing on those KPIs or metrics, but looking at the overall picture or the overall benefit which is going, that is very important. So that is, one major thing when you're working with business leaders, looking at the bigger picture, what value is going to come out, what value they are looking for, what is the major pain point you are going to solve for them. Another thing is, right, having them involved in all the discussions, right? You are building a model, but having them discussion, what are your thought process? You can have those, take them through the journey in a very simplistic way, right? You don't have to make it very complex or we are using, but you can give them the thought process, right? What you are doing, trying to solve, right? What, in a very simple way, keeping them involved in those discussions, keeping them those meetings or, those checkpoints to make sure that they are involved in the process and they feel, not just giving them in the end the model which has delivered, ensures that you are able to move in the right direction and bring out that value for them as well. So I feel, that is the major point, right? Having them in the loop, looking at the broader picture, keeping them aligned is a way to actually build, work together and bring value for both of the parties.
How do you simplify these things though? Because, the math is really hard.
Right.
But ultimately, people are hunting for growth or people are hunting for savings to create that value. What's your process for simplifying things down so that a commercial person who's completely non-technical or has not done a PhD in math can understand the concepts that you're bringing to life?
Yeah, when I discuss these with business leaders, right, of course, we don't go into the technical, this is the model, right? But what exactly it is doing. So if I am building a model for them, for example, for demand forecasting, right? So the concept will tell them that, okay, there's a time series model you are using, right? But what exactly? You are analyzing the patterns, historical patterns. So we take them for an example, this is what has happened in the past, right? And if you look at the data, right, this is how your trends or, how your demand was for this particular product in a particular region historically. This has been the spikes. These are some macroeconomic factors which impacted and that led to this particular. And this is what we are trying to capture through the model. And this is how we'll actually be able to predict in the future what's happened. So taking them through a very simple example and telling them that how model would be able to capture those scenarios using all the data we give it to, and then how it will actually be able to generate. So basically, it's a very, very simple process of just taking a few things and taking them through on their radar, right? How it exactly we are going to do is something I generally do to make it easier.
One of the funny use cases for me of using ChatGPT is asking it to come up with analogies for explaining multi-arm bandit model, for example, or other really hard technical concepts, or causal attribution, for example.
Right.
Because it really understands the mathematical concept and it really understands how to simplify this stuff down as well, and then gives you really funny stories that you can essentially tell off the back of that as well.
That's a good point. I think ChatGPT is making it all easier for us, right? And yes, I also use it sometimes to make it easier for me to express my thoughts.
So how do you ensure diversity and inclusivity when it comes to your data science teams? Mainly because, when you're working with AI models, there tends to be a lot of bias, right? So how do you account for that and deal with that within your role?
Right. So one is the diversity in the team, right? More about, which I understand is more about the hiring and how we ensure that. So as a women leader in my company, right, I do make sure that we give equal opportunities. Right, when we have a panel for hiring, we do ensure there are no unconscious bias happening in the panelists who are being selected, and and even when we screen those profiles, we try to actually give more. Means in case there are opportunities, right, someone who is returning from after a break, we don't disqualify them because they have taken a break, because that's what generally happens for women as well, right? A lot of them take break for personal reasons. So it's not that they have taken a break, so they should be excluded. We do give them opportunities to be onboarded. And also one thing we do, right, is to make sure that from a hiring perspective, right, the facilities we have in the organizations are something conducive. So we have cab facilities for women who are traveling, right? Because we do have sometimes calls which go beyond, we do have a call late in the night and there is a requirement to travel. We have cab facilities to make sure that they can travel back safely. We have a lot of facilities in house as well, which are conducive, right, to make them comfortable in while working in Sigmoid. So we want to make sure in Sigmoid, everyone is, there's a proper working culture and collaboration, and there are no unconscious bias for any women who is working here. So that is how I'm trying to ensure that we have that diversity. And now coming to your next part on models, right, which have, there are a lot of use cases. We actually in Sigmoid have developed a LLM validation tool, which basically checks each response for your ethical bias, toxicity, right, relevance. So it's basically a validation tool for so this was built for a question answering system, but again it can be customized to any kind of a solution. So every response is tested. So you get a score that how relevant it is to the question. So if you ask a question, right, it uses a RAG framework on a PDF documents to give you those answers. Now, once the answer is received, right, so there is a scored metric you also get. So you know that if there are certain bias, right, so if there is a toxicity, PI information is being disclosed, or so those are from the responsible AI, and also relevance, that how relevant and, how faithfulness and groundness, which are more from the performance metric perspective. Yeah, so for generative AI, I think it is very, very important because this field, there is a lot of hallucination which is there, right? There is a lot of inherent or unconscious bias which can come in. So I think though having some kind of a validation is necessary when we are building models. And I feel that is something is very, very important. Since I'm like I said, I'm very passionate about this field. I do feel that it's expanding rapidly. There are a lot of use cases and applications coming. But as anyone who is working in this field or building applications, we have to ensure the solutions we build, right? Because they are the solutions for the future. We do ensure that how we can make them more responsible when we talk about all these, from the ethics and privacy perspective.
But essentially, should machines monitor machines? As in, should AI monitor its own homework, right? So like when should humans get involved and be in the loop when it comes to validating outputs?
Yeah. So I think we do have yes, you're right. A lot of these validations are model validating model, and this is because of the way this is all structured. But I do feel human in the loop is important, right? It maybe depending on the scenario we have, right? The kind of solution we have built and how critical it is, or how much while testing we can test out, right? There could be certain use cases where you do see a lot of hallucination happening. More human in the loop can be incorporated as compared to somewhere which are less critical, and you see the model is performing well. But we at this stage right now, I do feel that human in the loop is important, and we should have human in the loop not only for this, but also to give that feedback back to those systems so that they continuously improve. So we should have that to make sure that we are building. So since we have not reached the stage, I feel that we can leave it without just reliant on machine. So human in the loop is important, and again that involvement can be decided based on the the solution and the criticality.
Super cool. So moving on to like process, what frameworks or methodologies do you recommend to ensure a product-centric approach to solving problems like demand forecasting or fraud, or determining fraud risk, for example?
Yeah, in general, right? Like now I'm working in a service industry. We do work. There are a lot of solutions we build for our clients. As a company, right, we always have this mindset of building like a product and not like in terms of, right, that we are building a solution just for a... So, and what are the things which we keep in mind, right, while we are building solution? First one is that when you're building that solution, there is a continuous iterative thought process, in the terms that it should not be that we are just building it one time. We always keep in mind that there would be an feedback received, and how we can actually build in a way that it can be incorporated and we can continuously enhance and improve that particular solution. And also important is that when we're looking at those like I spoke about those KPIs, it should not be just meeting that particular KPI, right? We should be focused on around how we can actually drive business values and how we can look at the overall picture. And what we as a company have done is that we have built a lot of accelerators, because what we have seen, right, when you build from a product mindset, right, one is that how we can use those some of the codes or some of the reusable components. So somehow when we are building a solution, there is one part is that there are some reusable components which can be actually be reused across when we build that product for across different companies, right, or different clients. Now the second part is there's some kind of a customization which needs to be done, right? So even that is actually one of the biggest benefit of building accelerators over products. In general, what happens is that when you're building products, right, so it's more about that you have a product which is built and then you need to work along for different clients. Now, with the mindset, since working in a service industry, we kind of have those frameworks, as in we build those accelerators in a way that there are certain reusable components, so that actually reduces our build time from 100%, building from scratch, to actually 30-40%. And then we can use those components which can be customized for clients. So we do keep that process in mind when we are building.
So services projects often prioritize customization. How do you balance the need for bespoke solutions, fully customized solutions, with the approach of, from a future thinking view of developing accelerators? So how do you kind of balance the need for a bespoke solution for a use case of one into thinking about that solution being possibly used for other use cases later on?
Right. Whenever we are building those solutions, right, like I said, that some solutions are something like if we have worked on it, we already are using some of the components. We do make sure that we are not just building for that particular, it's built in a way that there are certain reusable components which can be actually be used for different projects. And also there is a specific customization. So we do try to take up those learnings. So whatever learnings or customizations are there, right, we actually use those learnings when we are building for other clients. Maybe there are some good things we learned. There could be very specific customizations required for that particular project, or but we can use those when we are actually building it out for. That is how we try to balance it out. So even when you are building a very specific requirement for a client, that could actually become a learning or, something which can be used for different projects we might have done in the past. So we actually take back sometimes those learning and go back to some different clients and tell them that there are some new learnings and how we can actually enhance or improve those solutions. So, and we kind of enhance our accelerator further as well. So it's more about every project or any is a learning. You understand certain concepts, right? And those can be reused and actually be helpful for other projects as well. So keeping that mindset in mind that it's not just one, and that's the best part, right? Because we get to work with different clients and different projects. There are a lot of learnings across, and that we actually having that learnings and understanding on different kind of ways and different thought process, because it's not just the solution, there are different thoughts when you work with different leaders, right, different ways of thinking and from a business perspective, and how those solutions could be modified. And we actually are able to amalgamate all of them whenever we are working on a new problem, or even use them to go back to our existing clients and enhance those solutions further.
How do you keep up with all this stuff? Like there's like a new thing being launched every day, new model, new way of, processing data. Like what's your process of personally educating yourself?
Yeah. So like I said, I'm trying to catch up. I have not even able to catch up, right? This journey is, I agree, there's so much to learn, and it becomes quite daunting, right? Because you feel you're always lagging behind, because every day there is a new model or some new advancement. And I do so there are certain, websites and some information sources. So Andrew NG is one. I really kind of love him. So his deep learning ORG, he has a newsletters and he has some courses as well. I do follow a lot of these people like Jeffrey Hinton and Andrew Ng on their on LinkedIn as well as on Twitter to get those latest updates. Apart from that, I do interact with my peers as well. There are a lot of these conferences which I do and attend to understand what is happening, in this space, and interact with other folks in different, who are working in different industries to get those insights.
In terms of thinking about generative AI use cases, what's your favorite use case right now?
Interesting. So there are a lot. Well, I'm just thinking which one would be the favorite one. One of the projects we did recently for one of the clients which we are working on is, so they had this problem. So there was a hackathon which happened where we had which we competed with other vendors, and we won that hackathon. And the problem statement they had was that they wanted to build a product recommendation engine. So this company is a chocolate company, chocolate and coca company. And what they do is that, so it's a B2B company. So they work with all these, different confectionaries, different even brands like Mondelez and all. There's a specific requirement which comes to them from the sales will get a requirement on a certain SKU, and they have 20,000 SKUs, and it becomes very, very difficult to figure out what is the right SKU to recommend. They go back to R&D, which takes again 6 to 7 days, right? Because R&D has their own process and other priorities to get that recommendation back. Now, what we are doing for them is that we are building a recommendation engine, which basically is about understanding those needs. So when a customer request comes, we actually create a customer pitch, or basically that we summarize that, understand those requirements, then go back to their data, right? And actually try to see that from their, basically they have again a huge data. Again, we are trying to create a knowledge engine and then use generative AI on top of it based on the customer required, extract the relevant information and map it and get the right SKU. So that is something we are building on. And the response, so we did build a prototype in the hackathon, and the response has been immense because this is actually solving a very big problem for them. So what is happening is that today the sales, like I said, there is a huge process of, the speed to market is less. We also create a sales pitch. So what happens is that once that recommendation comes, we also doing cross-sell and upsell. And also apart from that, there's a sales pitch which gets generated. So for the sales agent, right, they also get what are the key features or the technical details which they can actually use to pitch it to their clients. So this whole sales cycle, and there are more things which are planned for the future, but that is one of my favorite use cases because this happened recently, and kind of value it will generate for the sales folks, because right now they miss out a lot of opportunities. What happens is that if you don't get the right recommendation, if they don't get it, they put that request for an NPD, which is a new product development. Yeah. So there is a lot of, but they already have a 20,000 SKUs, right? As a company, they don't want to invest into new product development. They want that how we can actually leverage that existing products which are there in our, which are sitting down in our inventory. Like we have so many products. Why don't we actually kind of recommend? There might be a slight mismatch in the customer requirement, right? So, but how we can actually suggest them which is the best closest match. They might be flexible on certain aspect. Okay, my fat percentage is a little less, right? But I'm fine with this product. It doesn't match the exact requirement, but it will work out.
What I really like about this example is that there are so many steps that you're cutting out in terms of the human process. And for the end user, the sales agent, you're essentially handing a response to them on the plate so that they can, action against that request very quickly. Whereas previously it sounded like they were taking days, if not weeks, to respond to a customer request, which is potentially, the slower you respond, the more likely you are to lose a deal. So that's very cool. What advice would you give to organizations looking to future-proof their AI and machine learning strategies? Because there's just so much happening. How do you lay the right foundations to set yourself up for success with all of these new things coming all the time?
I think first thing is to understand where you stand, right? So a lot of organizations are in different phase of their journey. So it's very, very important that you do that assessment, right? To understand that what exactly where you are, right? And there are a lot of parameters to look at. And we actually at Sigmoid have a generative AI assessment report. So you can actually go there, and there are a set of questions we ask to actually help you understand that where exactly you stand and which areas do you need help in. So I would say that for any organization, it's very, very important to look at different aspects, right? Do you have the right infrastructure, right? Do you have the right people? Do you have the right training, right? So there are so many aspects. So it's very, very important that we look at all these aspects, right? So and what kind of problems you're trying to solve. So it's very important to think about it, because what has happened is I've seen that in my interactions with a lot of folks, that because generative AI is there, right? Like everyone wants to do it without thinking that what exactly we are trying to achieve. So it's just because it has become the cool and magic word, we want to fit it into everything. Of course, it's very powerful, but having that thought process, like, defining that clear objective of what we are trying to achieve, and then starting on it could be that you might want to, set up that whole team in-house, right? Then it becomes a very different problem, because as compared to, you want to engage with certain partner who wants to do it for you. Now, depending on the kind of scale and the kind of problem you are trying to solve, every problem is different. But it's very, very important that we have a solid infrastructure in place, right? And so that, because again, privacy, ethical, those infrastructure, making sure that whatever the models we are building or the applications we are building are very, very robust. So that is critical factor. And then of course the talent, right? The people who are leading it, the driving it, the building that in-house talent, or partnering up with someone. So those things are very important, because those are the ones who would actually key to drive your solution to success.
If you could solve one major challenge with AI today, what would it be and why?
I think we kind of touched upon it. Like I said that about the ethical and, the how do we make sure that, so hallucination or, the ethical and bias, those are some of the areas which I feel are very, very important. We are improving over time, but still, that whenever we are building applications, there, like I said, there's a human in the loop. There is still that some area, right? We are not sure, or there could be an hallucination and the responses could, we won't get the responses we look for. And we are trying to, improve it through a lot of process, but I still feel there's a gap. So I just do want to make sure that how we can make it more foolproof. That would be an area I would love to. And I'm sure that would happen with the advancements and like you said, right? Every day we are having those powerful models now who can do reasoning as well. So we are moving towards that direction, and the kind of models, the responses you used to get like 1 year back and now are so different, right? So, but yes, that would be something I would definitely want, because then, just imagine, like you are very sure, like 100, although that's
can never be 100% sure.
epitome of reaching the,
Yeah.
that phase in our journey. But then it would be totally transformational. I would wait for that day to come, hoping that it comes soon.
The singularity is not far away. So let's wait and see. So you're an accomplished long distance runner. Do you find any parallels between the discipline required in running and problem solving using data science?
Yeah, I think long distance running, right, is very different. And when I did my first run, I still remember it was very difficult. It was not easy. And I wanted to stop, right? But the only thing in my mind was that I have to continue, right? I have to. And it actually, walking became very difficult at that point of time in the end, then running, because it was first. And so I had to kind of, run to make sure that I complete the 8 point. But I think one thing which I learned is, right, you don't sprint, right? When you're doing a long distance, you don't sprint,
Basics.
Yeah, you have to survive those 21 kilometers, right? It's not just a 100-meter sprint. It's a long journey. And so having that patience, right? And having to make sure that it takes time, but you have a goal in mind. So even for data science problems, you can't just solve them in I do see, like I told you about that thing about, just fitting that model and getting that answer, it doesn't work. You have to look at data. There is a step. You have to be patient. You have to keep on trying, iterating, thinking about new ways, new features which can be added to get to your correct solution. It's very important. So that I feel is a very something which I've also learned, to become more patient and having that clarity on the goal on the mind. And yes, I think again, you start enjoying the journey, right? So even with the long distance, right, the high you get, once you cross that finish line, right, you forget all those pain or of course it's not easy. Whenever I start, I always think, why am I doing this to myself? So it's always the high I get after I complete the run. And there's the term like runner's high, and it's actual, it's there. You get that high once you cross that line. And I think that same high you get when you're building those models, right? So it's a process you build.
And it works. Right?
Yeah, when it works and you see that and you get that, oh yes, I did it. That is, I think, some of the parallels I can draw from both.
What advice would you give to aspiring data scientists, specifically women looking to make their mark in a very male-dominated?
Yeah, I think first is that I personally don't, although, I feel that everyone is like the same opportunity. Although I do agree that we have less representation, and I would really, really want that we have more women. So I think we should, that first is to have that confidence, right? That everything is not about male. I don't believe that it's, it's just for male, or, that they only can do it. It's their field. I believe it's an equal field. You need to have talent. And even for talent, I believe, right, you just need to put that effort. It's a field. If you put that effort, have that passion, you can learn and you can, grow in that field. So don't have that inherent bias in yourself that it is a male dominated and you won't get that. If you work hard, you put that effort, you also have an equal chance to rise and grow in this field. And again, and it's all on yourself, right? If you believe that you can do it, continuously learn, improve yourself. And one thing I believe, right, like women kind of, this is the inherent, and I read Lean In as well, that also helped in my personally. So this was gifted to me by one of my women leaders, when I was young in my career. And that book actually has a very transformational impact on the way I thought. So one of the things they mentioned, right, there's a very good example which is there, and I would like to, share with. So Sheryl Sandberg, right, so who is the author of that book, she shares an example that there was an exam she and her brother gave, and she just felt, I've not done well. And her brother was like, oh my God, I just topped that exam, right? I've done amazing. And both of them got the equal percentage after the exam, right? They had the equal marks. So, and that is what in general I have seen as well, right? Women tend to underestimate themselves, right? That, even they will do the same thing, they will feel that we are not up to the mark, and the men are like, oh my God. And that is what happens, right? Even in your day-to-day interaction, I feel in my team as well, I have women, who are there, and then, but the men will come and say, we want this, or, we are confident, give us this opportunity. And women are always like not going for it. So I believe that you have that confidence, even if you're 50% ready, right? Go for it and ask for those opportunities, because that is what men do, right? So that is an inherent difference between women. And I think it's kind of, the way things, you're built, or, but get those opportunities, get that seat on the table, don't shy away, and continue to learn and grow, and you will rise.
Super cool. I loved the fact that you shared that somebody gifted your book. One of my questions that I like to close out the podcast with is, what book do you like to gift most to your friends and family?
So actually there are many. It's just not coming to my mind right now, but there was one about this guy who is an Indian guy who started his own startup. And the best thing about what he talks about in the book is, right, again, creating that value. So it's about do something which basically you should not sell your time. You should create that. Either it is like, the way you have created a postcard, right? Like basically creating something. It could be a code, or it could be something which generates value. So if you are selling your time, then you will always be kind of, lagging. You will never be able to build wealth or grow. You would always be at the...
That depends on how much you charge for your time.
That's true as well.
Okay. What productivity hacks do you use to make your life easier?
So one, I have a time block. So every morning there is a specific time which I blocked, again, to keep up with the ever growing and ever changing field of generative AI. And I also use Pomodoro technique. So that's like 25 minutes. That helps, like just keeping. So in that those are. And another thing is that I also create those focused, no disturbance, right? That in the morning and in some time blocks also, when I'm trying to work, right, I just try to make sure that all the distractions are away. And Pomodoro is one of the good ways to do that.
Yeah, false deadlines to yourself.
Yeah,
which is basically the way to get a lot of work done. I personally find, like, if I don't have a timeline or a due date, I can't get anything done. So using Pomodoro is a great way of doing that. Tanika, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This was a lovely conversation. I'm sure everyone's going to find a lot of value from it. If people want to reach out to you, how should they do that?
Yeah, so I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So you can, search for Tanika Gupta and you should be able to find me. And and I can share my email ID as well, which is rohini.tanika@gmail.com.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much for being on Applied Intelligence, and looking forward to chatting again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.